Thank you for the presentations. Jason, I don't know, I'm not supposed to spoil this, but was this your first time speaking at a conference? I think you told me that.
This is my first time.
Well, I think that went very well.
Way to go, good job.
Thank you, thank you.
I think people are, I heard a little shock in the clap. I don't think anybody could have told that. All right, so let's give Jason first a little time to breathe while we ask you a couple of questions, and then we'll get into this conversation.
All right.
One question that's upvoted here a lot is, does the quick compiler do any automatic optimizations to code beyond, code splitting and streaming? Because you talked a lot about the automaticness of the optimization. What else can we do when we start hooking into that process?
Well, again, what it does, it breaks down the chunks, it serializes it into the HTML mostly. But it can be expanded maybe in the future to do all kinds of other things, like, for example, like the quick insights idea. Again, I don't know enough about quick insights because I didn't build it. And Mishko was like, I talked to Mishko yesterday, and he was like, talk about quick insights as well. So I just put it in the slide deck. But yeah, it could do a lot of other things. Again, in terms of quick automatic optimization is also just a philosophy, not just behind the compiler, but also behind the framework itself. So we have all kinds of tools that'll help you also not make mistakes when building stuff. So for example, we have an image component, and if you just put in an image, a regular image within a quick app that you're writing, it's going to tell you you can use an image component, or it'll automatically fix it for you. It's going to show an icon, like in your front end on the browser, that you can just click and push a button, and it'll fix it up for you. That's not the compiler, but that's like the philosophy behind it is finding all kinds of ways to improve things.
Nice. Now this is not a question from the audience, but this is something that I always think about. It seems a lot of the performance-oriented frameworks now, we have Astro and Quake and Next.js are kind of like having to solve the same problems from ground up. For example, like image optimization, like things like that. Is there any sort of like a back channel or working group or anybody like? Are you trying to share this sort of like either the knowledge or the work, or is everybody sort of doing this in a silo?
Well, there is some sharing amongst the teams. So there's the Google Aurora team that have been helping out different frameworks that I know of, and we've tried to bring them over also to Quick to kind of see how we can collaborate further. We're in different channels on Discord with a lot of frameworks creators. So Mishko and Ryan Carniato, for example, are very good friends, and they keep talking to each other and always kind of share ideas. So signals and the whole thing and improving that. I think we could do more in terms of a community to bring the web forward and share more ideas and kind of combine tools to do that. Yeah, and I hope that happens very soon.
Nice. I know that you just said that you don't know that much about Quick Insights, but our most upvoted question here is probably because it uses the magic word AI.
Yes, I know.
Maybe we can, instead of trying to drill you on the specifics, we can maybe like broadly think a little bit about the future of compilers and optimization in general. Like on one hand, we have this domain that operates in like very rigid data structures like ASTs and et cetera. And then we have these sort of like language models that can operate on sort of like language in ways that like code, like generate code but may or may not be correct, may not be optimal. Like how do you each maybe see sort of like the future of compiler engineering, performance engineering, just DX in general with AI tools?
You want to start with this? Now that I've answered a few questions.
Yeah, no, that's a tough one, I think, especially for me because I don't know a lot about AI, but I feel like AI could be used a lot more, maybe on the development side for the people who are writing the compilers instead. I don't know. I don't know if a natural language is a great way for setting up like optimization. Maybe it is. I'm not sure, but yeah, I'm not sure. I don't work a lot with AI, so.
Again, like, is a question about AI, LLMs specifically, or?
Well, so the question that we have is, what do you mean that Quick Insights uses AI? But then I think more broadly.
Okay, let's broadly speak. What is an LLM, right? An LLM, in the end of the day, is an enhanced statistical model that just knows how to find groupings of things, right, in general. So with specifically Quick Insights, the way it works is, and I showed the graph, you basically have a correlation metrics graph, which shows you how many times a certain bundle has been loaded, right? So because we have all these segments and little chunks of JavaScript, right, and they only load when a user is. So think about when a user kind of interacts with something and then the browser goes and gets it from the cache, you can like ping and send information that specific cache of a bundle has been sent, and then build that matrix. And from that matrix, you can understand, like the AI can kind of statistically analyze and know which bundle has been used more, and then see if a few go in correlation with each other, so kind of in the same path of a user, then they can group that thing together and then say, okay, these 5 or 10 bundles have been used a lot by X amount of users, so we can put that together into one bundle. So that would be the way that it would work.
Nice. I actually would have tons more questions about that, but maybe we don't drill deep on the AI here. We can have a conversation about this
I am not an AI expert, that's for sure.
Okay. Well, let's talk about.
There is another track for AI, no?
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about something that you guys are experts in. One for Jason here. These are kind of two questions that I think are related, so let me just read them out both, and then you can sort of address them. So first question is, how have you managed your open API schema? By hand, or is it generated from backend code? And then the other question is, in broad strokes, what is the process of creating a type-safe API client from a non-JavaScript backend? So like, I guess these are sort of about the open API.
Yeah, those are good questions. In my experience, I've sort of seen both for the open API generation. I've seen some teams that would generate their open API based on their code. I did that a lot. I used to work at Unity, and we had a lot of backend services that were in C#. And in .NET, there's a lot of tools for automatically generating your open API. So we sort of created this pipeline where our C# code generated an open API file. Our open API file was used to generate a front-end client. So it was really easy. You just update your C#, and then it sort of propagates down all the way to the front end, makes it really easy. But I've also seen teams that sort of did the reverse, where they wrote their open API file by hand and then used that to generate their back-end code and their front-end code. Cool. So you could sort of go both ways. It's personal preference, I guess. And the second question, sorry.
I mean, just the process of creating a type-safe API client from a non-JavaScript backend. So
from a non-JavaScript backend. Yes. Yeah, that's the great thing about OpenAPI is that it doesn't matter at all about what your backend language is, as long as it could use an OpenAPI file. It's agnostic to your backend language.
Yeah, it seems to me, this is more of a comment, less of a question. I get to do this because I have the microphone.
We also have microphones.
Yeah, I know.
We can start asking you questions.
Yeah, exactly. You can tell me that I'm wrong. But it seems like for a few years, at conferences like this, we had a lot of talks about GraphQL as being the solution, for sort of like...
For everything.
For everything.
Yeah.
But specifically for the, describing sort of like in a type-safe way your API. And I think in recent years, I feel a lot of like practicing software engineering teams going for open API instead, like less buy-in for the full tooling stack and more just the kind of problem being solved. Do you have any sort of opinions on this? Like, what does that look like now?
Yeah, for me, I think I like that. I like that people are using GraphQL a bit less because I feel like GraphQL is a bit heavy. It has a dependency. Like if you're trying to use it on, like you can't use it easily on a CLI, for example, or like on your front ends or any app in general, then you need some dependency on some GraphQL client. So in my opinion, if you could generate like a specific client for your backend that uses OpenAPI, I feel like it's a lot more flexible. But then it might not take some of those nice parts of GraphQL into account. So pros and cons.
It's like there's this trend going back to simplicity, I feel. Right, so GraphQL seemed to have been, it was sold and marketed as something that's going to solve a lot of things, but in the end, like it was much more complex to build. Like again, from my experience, I only played around with it, but I know of teams that have done this. And think about also, I was going to say something else and I forgot. Go ahead.
Well, we'll think back to that later.
Oh, no, I remembered.
All right,
microservices, for example, as a trend, right? Again, every company almost, microservices is the next big thing. We're going to do that. And then nowadays, everybody's going back to monoliths because it's easier to maintain.
Yeah, it's especially evident when you come to conferences like this one, sort of like year after year, you see sort of the trends and forces sort of like playing out.
Yeah, the pendulum keeps swinging, you know.
Yeah, exactly. But okay, let's get back to compilers. So there's two questions which I am going to again bundle up so you can both sort of talk about it. So the question for Jason is, if I wanted to write a compiler from scratch, what would be a good way to get started? And then, Yoav, to add to that, you mentioned that the quick compiler is written in Rust. Mm-hmm. Do you think, broadly, is that the way for compiler engineering, or how would you do that? But I'll let Jason sort of address that first.
I would think if you want to write a compiler from scratch, you need to figure out why do you want to do that? Like, what is your target? If it's just for learning purposes, that's great. And then I would say, use any language that you're most comfortable in, because the language is not going to be the hard part. The hard part is going to be figuring out like what kind of structure of language that you want to create, and all the tokens in it, and what is the shape. And then you need to figure out like how to parse that language and how to create your AST. And then you need to figure out how the runtime will work. So there's a lot to it. But I think as an exercise, I think there's a lot of resources out there on how to create a compiler from scratch. I'm blanking on the top of my head, but whoever asked that could come to me in the hallway, and I'll provide some, I'm sure.
Yeah, but I like the fact that you should always ask yourself why first. Yeah. So in terms of if you should write a compiler in Rust, again, like Jason mentioned, use whatever language you're comfortable with. In the case of Quick's Optimizer, the reason Rust was chosen was, again, to be super performant and be as fast as it can be. And again, Manu, who wrote the compiler, Manu Almeida, who was part of the Quick team and wrote most of the compiler, didn't know Rust while he was writing it, right? So he knew that SWC does a lot of the work for AST parsing, and combining that with like JavaScript APIs with read and rollup was a way he kind of approached it. But again, Rust is very close to bare metal, so usually if you want to have super performant working code, then compiler would probably be the better way to approach. But again, whatever you're comfortable with.
Nice. Now getting into the sort of why, why would you build a compiler, or not why would you build a compiler, but to hopscotch from that, there's this question, like, what other things can we do when we have access to the compiler API in TypeScript? Like, are you aware of any other sort of cool projects that people should know about, or do you have any ideas knocking at the back of your head that you would love to build now that you're familiar with these tools?
Like in my day job, for example, I use the compiler API a lot. We try to make APIs for some game development tools, and we try to, like in my day job, we're creating a gaming engine, but that gaming engine is written in Rust for performance reasons, but the interface will be in TypeScript. So we're doing lots of code generation so that the interface between Rust and TypeScript is going to be a lot smoother. So that's one example of like reasons you might want to use the compiler APIs for like these custom solutions. But it's extremely flexible. Like if you could think of code that you could write, then you could think of code that you could generate as well. It's usually best for generating boilerplate. So if you have large teams that have a lot of patterns that are repeated everywhere, you can maybe generate those based on some less error-prone config formats. In related to popular projects, I'm also blanking, but I'm sure I'll think of some when I'm not on the stage.
Yeah. Like, I mean, this is a question curiosity from me. Like, there are some really popular code gen projects. For example, the GraphQL code generator, the GraphQL. Are those all using TypeScript, like compiler API on the background?
They most likely, at some point, they probably are. Like, for example, a lot of bundlers, you might not use the TSC command directly, or you might not use the compiler API directly for you, but at least you usually write the compiler options, and then you pass it to something like Vite or Webpack or any bundler, and that at some point in their bundling process will have to compile the TypeScript code to JavaScript.
All right, amazing. Now we have questions that I can't force into a themed conversation anymore, so let's just go one by one.
Sure.
You can upvote these questions, by the way. I know many of you have already done so, but I'm just going to ask some of the questions from the top of the list. This question. I actually don't know which talk this is about. I think I missed this part. What does import generated package mean? Was this from?
Oh, I think that was
okay.
on
Yeah.
That was in.
Do you install and import it as package name at latest, or do you have automation to install it and bump packages on in repo?
That's a good question. It's up to you how you want to do it. So the way I've seen it done a lot is that if the backend updates and generates a new open API, it could set a version for that open API. And then that version could be used to create a new version of your front end. And then your front end could optionally upgrade to that version when it wants. But it all depends on if your backend is backwards compatible or not. Because if it's going to do a breaking change, or it does breaking changes often, then it might want to update the latest version all the time. If your backend is smarter and it tries to do a more graceful versioning, then it could release versions of the generated client, and then your front end has like a window there to upgrade versions when it can.
Yeah, you could also use tools for automation on the front end side. So, for example, Renovate, I know, is a tool that so if you generate a package for the backend for the types, like Renovate can open up a PR that kind of do it, and then if your tests break on the front end, you gotta do the changes and kind of fix that up, because types have changed.
Yeah. Do you yourself use this in a kind of monorepo setup? Like, is this like workspace versioning kind of thing, or?
The way I used to do it, it was versioned. So we would most of the time though we were too lazy to set up the versions because it could be difficult. So we sort of just tried to make our backend as backwards compatible as possible. And if we did a breaking change, we'd quick update the front end, so it doesn't show any problems.
So a ton of adapter code. Yeah, adapter 1.12.
Yeah.
All right, amazing. Okay, well, let me one for Yoav for a change. So what are the biggest challenges at the moment regarding Quick in general? Are there any large companies using the framework? And it's also great to hear about the TC39 efforts on streaming.
Yeah, so there's some big companies that are doing some POCs and testing out Quick to see if they adopt it. Again, I can't share names at this point. But what is hindering right now adoption? In general, not much, in terms of, you could go out and try it and see if it fits your needs, first of all. Secondly, I think the one thing that we should be doing, so we have an option to use React components and Angular components and Vue components within Quick, but we don't have the other way around, except for you can use Quick within Astro, for example. So you can have resumability inside of Astro, which is really cool. So you can check that out, first of all. Again, it's mostly, I think, time, right? People need some time to kind of get used to it or try it out. It's about the ecosystem growing, right? There's work being done on libraries by the community. So, for example, Quick UI is a community project to have kind of a ShadCN style component library for Quick. Other than that, Jason mentioned Valleybot. So Fabian Hiller, who is the creator of Valleybot, is also part of our Quick Heroes, and he's been helping out, and he created also a form library called, I'm spacing out on the name, but a form library that also works with Quick and Solid and others. So there's things happening. There's a lot of work being done. And follow the space, right? And join the Discord. We got a great community that talks a lot, and there's a lot of interesting. Oh, there's another interesting project that there's a type-safe way to define routes within a Quick City application that was ported over by a project that Jack Harrington just did for Next.js that does the same thing. So type-safe routing, TypeScript for your routes.
Mm. And then we have to ask the question. It is here the standard question. You probably know what the question is already. Is Quick production ready?
Yes.
Okay, good. So to go back to broaden that conversation a little bit about what is hindering adoption, I think this is a very interesting moment to be at a future Frontend because we for 10 years we pretty much had hegemony of the one approach, the SPA approach, which you sort of talk about, and then this sort of the 2.5, the SSR, sort of just trying to basically keep the ship stable. But as we move away from, for example, using, specifically the React implementation of the component model, we need to say goodbye to a lot of assets that we're sort of used to, right? All of our component libraries are written in it, all of the incredible open source ecosystem of things and tools and packages that we are sort of using.
Not necessarily. So like I mentioned, you're saying component libraries and stuff like that. You use your React components within a quick application. So you get the whole ecosystem of React within Quick if you want to.
Right. Is there any limitations to that?
The limitation is every kind of use of a React component you do inside Quick is rendered as an island, right? So then you have to do inter-island communication. But potentially, you could take a fully used React app and just put it inside Quick and then communicate it with signals from outside of Quick. So you can have like 2 React applications that are inside a Quick application. You can pass down a signal from like your root Quick app and then communicate between the 2 React applications or like the general Quick application.
I guess it makes it a lot easier to migrate from React to Quick because you could easily do this.
Yeah, that is the idea, basically.
Nice.
I mean, this is the compiler session, so I have to ask, over the years, I think a lot of people have proposed sort of different ways of cross-compiling, UI components from one sort of framework to another. I think the Stencil project comes to mind as one, but
yeah.
there's a
There's
few
a great open source project by Builder.io called Mitosis that does this.
That's right, yeah, that was the one I was blanking on. I saw a great presentation about it last year. So is Mitosis something that you use internally as part of your tool chain?
What, in Quick?
Yeah, or like at Builder?
Well, at Builder, they did use Mitosis to do like the whole generating from the SDKs to generate like different SDKs for different frameworks. Also, Mitosis just opened up a new website that I know of, so you can go check it out. And it's a great way to kind of have one way to write components that you can generate to a lot of other things. So, yeah, you got to check it out.
So that's Mitosis.
Yes, Mitosis.
Yes. I do actually recommend people who are interested in that cross-compilation thing. It's a very cool project. So yeah.
Yeah, it's all compiler-based ASTs and all that fun stuff.
Nice. All right, so let's see, do a little grooming. We've answered this one. Okay, Jason, let's go one for you. You showed us how tools make generating code easy, but the result looked pretty write-only, the generated code. Who's going to approve my PR when I try to commit the result?
I don't know. I just merge it directly.
Force push.
Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't review a log file, so why would you review generated code? You assume that it's correct because
no, generated code, I guess you wouldn't necessarily review. Like ideally, the code that you write that will be doing the generation, you want to write tests for. So you want to write tests for your generation code, and you want to write tests for the code that is generated. So if you write tests for the code that's generated, then you know that everything that's generated in the future is going to be, safe. So ideally, for generated code, you don't really need an approval, in my opinion. Unless you're updating the generation script, then it's always great to get another few eyes on it.
By the way, that's something we're doing in Quick 2.0. There's a lot of work being done on the serialization of the HTML, and then to test it out, you're actually generating, there's tests for the generated code, and then kind of way to snapshot test between the stuff and make sure we're not breaking anything. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so the next highest question, and this is a question I love because it's an opinion question, and opinion questions are good because you can give us some hot takes. What's your opinion on the new React compiler? I know Jesse, you worked in React. You do work in React. Yeah. So are you? What's your take on?
I looked at it briefly. I'm pretty impressed. I think a lot of React code in the past, it was sort of on the user, on the dev to figure out how to optimize it yourself. So any tool that comes out that will reduce that, where they could figure out the optimization for you, seems like a win to me.
Exactly.
So
Automatic optimization for everybody.
Yeah.
That's what's great.
I'm not sure. I can't think of any cons. Mostly, I guess there's an extra step, and maybe it could take a build a bit longer, but I think it's worth it for what you get from it.
Yeah, well, one sort of opinion that I've heard floated about, or some people say, that it's sort of not enough. It's only that we have now sort of in the future front-end sense, we have from a mental model point of view, we have now transcended the sort of React re-render the whole world model to go more towards actually reactivity in signals, for example, and that the React compiler is just essentially a patch on top of what is fundamentally an outdated model. model, and we're just trying to extend the shelf life of it as we sort of move forward. Is there anything to that, or do you think that the React compiler itself is something that is basically fixing, sort of React's reactivity?
Okay, in my opinion.
In your opinion?
In my opinion.
Yes.
I gotta say, it's a patch, right? All it does, like specifically, what is the biggest foot gun in React is not necessarily the over re-rendering of stuff, right? It's the foot guns that you could encounter while writing like React code, like the way the dependency arrays work. Like, it's still not gonna hinder developers from writing bad code in React, you know what I mean? It is just going to optimize the things that I've written. If you write bad code, it's still going to not work properly or work unexpectedly.
Yeah, I think there's some truth to the statement that you said, that it's sort of extending the shelf life of React a bit, but I don't see that as a downside. I think it's good to extend it. It's getting a bit better, but there is some flaws to it. Mm-hmm. But at least it's not like abandoned,
Yes, I think this will make a good follow-up conversation for the hallway track. I think there's a lot of people who have worked here in React for a long time, so they'll all each have their opinion. All right, let's see. We have 4 more minutes left, so let's do some quick ones just here at the top of. Jason, what would you decide? When would you decide to write a code generator instead of using a generic code generator like OpenAPI generator? Like, when do you build your own tools versus when you use something generic?
I think ideally you use a tool that exists as often as possible. You don't want to write a generation tool if you don't have to. Sort of what I was trying to get to at my talk is that it's great to generate for like a stack that you have that might be very specific. Like maybe you're using Angular and a very specific fetching library, and you want to create a client that's very tailored to that. Maybe there's no tools already created, so maybe that's a good time that you could investigate generating your own client. But I would say first thing you should do, that's why in that list of ways to use a client or generate a client, number 0 was use one that's already exists. Because usually there's...
Yeah, always find a tool before you start writing your own.
Yeah.
It's like, use a framework. That's what the React team says, right? Use a framework. Otherwise, you're building your own framework.
All right. So, Yoav, is there a benchmark of how better the performance in Quick is against, let's say, lazy loading modules in the way that you do in Webpack? Like, how much does this sort of like compiler, sort of like splitting approach actually get us?
Well, honestly, I don't know. We have shunned away from benchmarks at the time being until we get to 2.0 because Miško at some point started benchmarking stuff, and then he found out a bug or something that really annoyed him, and then he was like, I need to do the how we do serialization over again, and that's why we're doing 2.0. Also to make the code a little bit more friendly for new contributors. So there's work being done. You could come up to me and talk to me and come up to Discord and keep on asking those questions, and then I can poke the bear and we can get those benchmarks done. I didn't have time to do it. None of the team have been focused on doing benchmark. We're just focused on shipping 2.0.
Yeah, if your sales is performance, then, like Jason said, first you measure and then you...
Again.
Oh, sorry, it was a Euro talk as well, yeah.
Yeah,
that was Euro talk, yeah. First you measure, then you sort of like change, and then you sort of like measure again. It's like when you work on these tools, like how do you know that if you don't have a benchmark, like how do you know that the changes that you make are
right?
effective?
So it's kind of related to what we're talking about, the adoption story, right? So until we don't have like real world metrics from like Crux, sort of core world vitals that Google measures over time, until we don't have enough applications in production, we're not going to really know like what is the real world like metrics for that, right? So until we don't see more quick applications, if you open up Crux now and there's about, I don't remember, I haven't done that in a while, but about 100 applications in production right now in Quick, and their scores are much better, right, than other frameworks. But until we don't have a bigger statistical significance, we don't want to talk about it again, because it's not about, it's not I can't say that word, what I wanted to say, but it's not a measuring contest as well all the time, but it's good to measure so you can kind of compete in a friendly manner and push each other. forward. But yeah, there's a right time for everything, I'd say.